Welcome to the Bedroom to Boardroom podcast with me, Noel Reeves, the podcast that's helping small to medium-sized businesses to not feel alone and to be part of a community. Today I'm joined by Joe Burns. Joe, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Joe, I'll let you introduce yourself and who you are and what you do to the audience.
Yeah, so Joe Burns, I have started businesses since I was 21. First business I established was an IT services company called Pyronet back in 2005, and I sold that in 2016. I've then gone on to launch two other businesses since. Another IT services business and cybersecurity business, and also a business that helps other IT companies to grow and scale.
What inspired you to get into either IT or business?
You know, when you're at school, you don't really know what you want to do for a career, for your life.
Yeah.
So, but I do remember this moment when I was in a class and the careers advisor had come in to school to basically talk you through what you need to do to get into your chosen career. I was sat behind a guy called Mark Wire. I remember the moment really well. It's weird, but I was sat behind a guy called Mark Wire, and I said, I have no idea what I want to do for a career, for my future. And he said, I want to become a systems analyst. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, you just play with computers all day and you get paid loads of money for it. So I was like, oh, I'm pretty good. And even though going back then, computers weren't as they are now, but I was like, I'm pretty good with technology and stuff. So that's what I'll say. So I went into the careers advisor and said, I want to become a systems analyst. And she said, okay, for that, you need to go to college for this. You need to get these grades, go to college, go to university, get these grades, then you can become a systems analyst. And I'm like, no, there's no way I'm doing that. I was pretty already fed up by education. But weirdly, the idea stuck that IT, right, computers, that's what I could potentially do as a career. So when I eventually left school, still with no idea of what I was actually going to do, I basically applied for the BTEC National Diploma in Computer Studies at a local college. Literally decided the day before the college enrollment days, but that is what I kind of set my eyes on doing. And I ended up within the first 2 months almost completing the whole, everything that they asked us to do. I would do it in minutes, and it'd be a three hour lesson.
Right.
And then so I used to sit there going, now what do I do to the teachers, to the tutors? And they say, well, if you wouldn't mind helping everybody else with their programming,
right,
then, I'm like, and again, I actually enjoyed that. I was like, I get to help others. And the novelty wore off quite quickly. And so I ended up just dossing for the rest of the time. And so eventually I just thought there's no point me.
Motivation's gone.
Yeah, that was it. So I dropped out of college. But then after I dropped out of college, I was just in pursuit of an IT job. But I didn't have any proper qualifications at that point, didn't have any experience.
Yeah.
So I was just looking for a break, basically.
Yeah.
Who's got a job in IT that I can do? So, yeah.
And you got that break?
I did get a break. Yeah, I did a couple of jobs, one in a school, and then I worked for Driving Standards Agency in the IT department. That was my first proper IT job.
Yeah.
And then after that, I had a bit more experience and I applied for Pendragon Merge Group, which was a great base to learn more.
What led you then at 21? So you're doing that at 19. At 21, you started your first business. So what was how did that come about?
Both my parents were running businesses at the time. My dad had an accountancy practice for my entire life. Okay. He was an accountant. My mum was running a financial advice business, a mortgage advice business. Right. So they both had businesses. So I'd got parents that I looked up to as business owners. And at Pendragon, I met my business partner for the first business, a guy called Rory. We worked together, and he saw something in me, I think, in terms of that tenacity and that kind of attitude. And he basically approached me and said, I want to start an IT business doing what we do now, but for other businesses. And I'd like you on the journey with me if you're up for it. And it didn't take me a second. I was like, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this. Let's go for it. So yeah, that's how the first businesses it started, really.
And that was 2005.
Yes.
And you started with just the two of you?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Did you have a plan at that point of who you were you going to specialize in something? Who was your target audience, or had you thought we're just going to go and do this and find out?
Yeah, we had a plan, but the plan that we'd written a business plan with financials down. Yeah. But the main reason we did that was because we were naive enough to think we could go to the bank and get some money to start a business.
Okay.
When we were very quickly told by the bank, that's not how it works. Like, we don't give brand new businesses with no track record money. That's not how it works. Yeah. He advised us to go and borrow the money ourselves and put the money into the business, which is what we did. Target market, things like that. No, we were winging it. We were learning as we go. We did whatever we could to try and win clients. but we picked up clients in the first month or two, so we got going, and we had that general organic growth happening, bearing in mind that the two of us were trying to do everything, as you do when you start a business. So you are, you're the sales, you're the operations, you're the finance, you're the cleaners, you do everything. And then over time we were hiring and off, delegating some of that.
So the winging it bit's really interesting, because you see a lot of the sort of, the right way to do things is to, like you say, have your plan and do all your financial forecasting and this stuff before you start. I didn't do that with my business. I just knew what I knew, which was print and events, and I knew who I wanted to go to, and I knew how I would do that. But I didn't write it down anywhere. It was just in my head.
Yeah.
And whether it's just pure luck that it actually worked, or but I genuinely feel a lot of business owners, we're all accidental business owners, I think, most people. And I think that absence of a plan doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to win.
No.
I'm not advocating don't have a plan, just go and wing it and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But personally, I think when you've just got a passion and drive, that will outperform any piece of paper or written document. In my experience. So it's good to hear that you've done that, and obviously that business was a great success, and you got it to the point where you exited that business. So do you want to talk to us a bit about that? How did that come about?
The reason for selling the business was we'd done really well over those 10, 11 years to grow that business, but our ambitions to grow further beyond were misaligned, and we realized that when we started sitting down and doing more long-term planning, we realized that our ambitions weren't on the same page. And so that became a bit of a disconnect, and also was a struggle. We realized then why it was a struggle to make business decisions between the two of us, because we were actually aiming for different things. And so that was a real point of clarity where the two of us went, well, actually we need to do something about this, because we won't continue the success that we've had if we're not on the same path. So it meant that basically one of us needed to step away and let the other do what they wanted to do. And that was the original conversation. And it was going to be that I was potentially going to buy Rory out of the business. But we didn't want to come up with a valuation between ourselves. We didn't want to create a conflict or a negotiation between ourselves. So we were like, well, let's see what somebody else would be prepared to pay for the business, and then that can set the valuation. And then I just want first refusal to be able to pay you 50% of that valuation if you're up for it. But equally, if an offer came along and I was, comfortable with that offer, I'd take it as well, and would just sell the business, which is ultimately what ended up happening. I wasn't really done with the business. I was enjoying growing it, and I was enjoying what it was about. It wasn't really for me to pack up. So when we sold the business, Rory exited essentially, and I carried on as became the group managing director to the group of businesses that bought us. Really. Right. So it was a different challenge, which I was well up for. Different challenge, higher revenue business, 40 odd staff at one point that I was kind of responsible for. So it was good because it gave me some new challenge and new experience, really.
Were you surprised at that point in that you obviously took the money and didn't decide to buy Rory out?
It played on my mind for quite a while through this process. I was like, shouldn't I? And I even looked to people that I knew to potentially co-invest and lend me some money and have equity in the business. So I knew a few people that might be able to facilitate that for me. So I looked into that as an option, and I came very close to going, well, actually, that's what I want to do. But I kind of decided at that moment that, the analogy is like I was at the poker table and I'm on a good streak. And I was like, right, now's a good time to walk away from the table with my chips and not put additional pressure and additional risk on myself at that moment in my life, where I'd have then gone from a relative level of comfort to high pressure, high stress. So I chose to walk away from the table at that point.
And do you have any regrets of that?
No, not really. Obviously, there's so many things that I think on reflection differently about. But I wouldn't say they were regrets. They were all learning experiences for a start. And the other thing is, I think it was the right thing at the right moment, and it's led to where I am now as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So no regrets. I just think on reflection, there could have been so much that was better than we did.
When that deal went over the line and you got some money, Like how did that make you feel?
I paid off my mortgage
Right.
on the house. I remember the reaction from the woman behind. She's like, "Oh my, well, that's good then, isn't it?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's quite a good day, really." So yeah, it was not. It was that's a great feeling. You know, it's a really nice feeling to be able to have that level of comfort financially.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then it's I've pushed on since then, really.
So I guess could you have stopped working at that point, or not quite? Because you hear stories about people when they sell their business and then almost walking out into almost like an abyss of no purpose,
Yeah.
no sense of, when you go from being the owner of a successful business to all of a sudden you're not that, you're not that anymore.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of self-reflection that goes on for a lot of people.
I call it the cliff edge, and again,
Yeah.
I'm advising other business owners, and I talk about that scale to exit mentality.
Yeah.
And I always say you don't want to hit it as a cliff edge. You should be thinking about what is next, right? Because as you say, it often pulls the rug from under people when they get to that point. And I experienced a bit of that myself. Like, now what? What's my purpose? What am I doing with myself now?
Yeah, I feel like in society we have, like, I think the national lottery hasn't really helped, because the lottery is like an opportunity to, in one day, obtain a life-changing amount of money.
Yeah.
And we all aspire to that, but you also hear so many stories of how it just ruins people's lives because, the change is so massive, and then the shift in dynamics with family and friends and all this sort of stuff. Sometimes I think as a society, we think of, in business, you think, well, one day I'm going to sell it and get all that money and all these problems will go away. Whereas the reality is probably the things that we actually enjoy the most is the journey.
Yeah.
Not getting to that point where we can now, put our feet up and do nothing. Or for me, I'll just play golf every day, I think.
Yeah.
But I've sort of given it thought on and off of what would I do if that was my situation, and I think I would need to do something.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so if I need to do something, why don't I just do what I'm doing now?
The only thing that I tend to advise people when it comes to business and scaling, make a valuable business. Even if you're not planning, even if you've got no intention to sell the business, you should build the business as a valuable asset so it could be sold.
Yeah.
The one thing that over and over again I keep talking to people about is that a lot of people do enjoy the business, and I say to them, "What's your exit strategy?" And they go, "I haven't got one. I'll do this forever." And you're like, "Well, you won't." And the one that's the most heartbreaking that I see is, I always talk about relocation, relationships, and health, right? Relocation and relationships can change your mentality on whether things are right to carry on the business. But the worst one is health. You see somebody that gets a terminal illness in their business. They've been running their business for their life, for a vast majority of their life. They've put years of effort in. Then they get a critical illness, or someone in their family gets a critical illness. What happens then is there's an immediate flick of a switch, because nobody can tell me that somebody gets critical illness, or someone close in their family gets it, and their mentality is, "Oh, do you know what? I want to crack on at work." Right? Nobody's thinking that.
No.
Most people are thinking at that stage, what do I do to make the very most of the time that we have, right? But the unfortunate situation is people haven't thought about that or built a business so that it's a valuable asset that can be sold. And ultimately what happens is that their life's work ends up meaning nothing in terms of the facilitation of things that they actually really need right now. So I'm always an advocate of, even if you've got no intention to, plan the business as if it's a sellable asset.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So I just wanted to just go back a bit. You mentioned about your parents and your dad being an accountant, your mum being a financial advisor. That's pretty useful. And I imagine that most people, myself included, like my parents have been on the podcast and are not business people at all.
Yeah.
But they gave me things that are, tangible things that are not business related, but, around relationships and confidence and all those sort of things. Whereas I would imagine, and tell me, how did that, I imagine that was a great help for you in terms of getting some understanding about things that your parents would have had exposure to that you wouldn't have as a young person.
From my dad's perspective, he gave me the push. He gave me the confidence, the push to say, go and you could do this. So that was good. But from a business point of view, like I say, he really didn't care about growing a business. He just wanted to do enough hours to live not even a fancy life, a relatively moderate lifestyle. And on my mum's situation, she'd run a business, but it did close down at one point. And I think her mentality wasn't such that she was built to scale a business. So she ended up working for a TSB and doing mortgages for them. So I didn't really get any practical business advice from either of them, if I'm fair. The one thing I will say, so my dad gave me the influence and the push and the confidence. My mum, in a completely different way, gave me something by when I was very young. She always used to say, I used to say, I want this, I want that, I want that.
Yeah.
She'd always say, oh, wants don't get, or something
Yeah.
like, you
Yeah.
can't, you don't get what you want all the time. And in a way, I fought against that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's almost like
Yeah.
well, I will,
Yeah.
if I want something,
Yeah.
I'll go get it,
Yeah.
right? So, because that's the kind of personality I am. I'm someone that if somebody challenges me on
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
I want to prove it.
Yeah.
Whereas some people, when you challenge them, they suppress
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
lose confidence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm that sort of personality. So when I was just hearing that a lot growing up, I fought against it.
Yeah.
And that's part of my personality today. Is I'm so goal driven, target driven.
Yeah.
I always need to push for something.
Yeah.
So I always want something and go get it. So
Yeah.
I think that has influenced me, but in a
Yeah.
different way to you.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I'd be exactly the same. And my mum would tell stories of like me being young. I would just keep going until I got what I wanted, even whether that was wearing her down because I wanted her to give me permission to do something or whatever it was, or I would, and once I got control of being able to do things myself, if someone says to me, you can't do that, I'm like, oh, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, sleeves are up.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a common trait in a lot of business people who are maybe accidental business people who get into something. It's because they've got that drive to not necessarily prove someone wrong, but just prove that they can.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to do with that. So you've sold business, you carried on working for a while. How long did that go on for?
That was 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you've decided, right, I'm going to do something else now.
Yeah. So I exited the business. Nice, clean, friendly exit. I kind of got the business to a point where it didn't really need me, which was the goal, right?
Yeah.
And so I was able to step away comfortably, and we amicably. I carried on doing some consultancy back to the business a couple of days a week, so that there was a phase out period.
Yeah.
But I wanted to start again, start my own business essentially, and I started a consultancy firm helping other businesses with process automation, helping them to become more efficient, because it's something that I've always been quite good at. That was a lifestyle business. It was consultancy time, just time for money, relaxed kind of environment. But yeah, I'd done that, and then within the same year, and not through my own drive, but there was a couple of guys that worked in the last business, Perinet business, called Scott and Joe. They wanted to start their own IT business. I'd known that for a while, that they wanted to start their own IT business. And at one point, Scott asked me if I would start a business, would you help me? And I said, yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. Which is how I am always. If someone wants to do that, even if they're in our own team, I'm always like, well, let me know. I'll help you out. Like, it's not a problem. So this is 2019 now. And I was like, now might be a good time to do this. I'm doing consultancy for lots of businesses on process efficiency, which crosses over to technology. And I was like, I reckon I could just bring opportunities really easily, because I'm seeing everyone with these problems. And so we basically went, let's do it, let's launch it, and we launched Reformed IT. So that was how that got started.
So there's 3 of you in that business.
3 of us, yeah, 3 co-founders, equal shareholders.
Okay.
And it's good because we've got the right mix of personalities, a right mix of skills. My main responsibility still to the day, but even early on, was I'll find opportunities. I can talk to people, so I can bring opportunities to the table, and we just need to build a team that's capable of looking after
delivering on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's 2019. So you've gone through probably a bit of a turbulent time during COVID, or was that a good opportunity for
it? So we just got started out. We hired 2 people literally before COVID, but I think it was March 2020. We hired 2 people into our team. And then immediately after that, we were like, oh, right, what are we going to do? The value of IT services at that time increased, because people realized how important it was, and it's caught them off guard. So where people had got good technology, a good setup, and a good business, and a good IT services business working with them, they benefited and they flourished. So although it's hard to find opportunities, the perceived value of our service had gone up. So that helped.
And so over the last few years, that's been growing nicely.
So for some context, the Perinet business, which started in 2005, it took us 11 years to get to £1 million revenue. In contrast, the Reformed IT business, which started in 2019, bearing in mind we also had a year and 2 of disruption, we got to £1 million in 3 years, not 11. And we're currently sat at 1.4 and plan to do 2.1 million revenue this year. So the growth curve for this business is looked ridiculous.
So is there anything in particular that's allowed you to, or that helped you to achieve such rapid growth as opposed to before being it more steady?
Planning that growth in advance and decide. So what I always say to people about planning is decide on the outcome, decide on the goal. What is it you're trying to do?
Mm.
And going back to the exit strategy, even, it's like, what do you want to get out of the business?
Yeah.
Plan that out. When do you want it? What does it look like? Start with that, then reverse engineer what you're going to do.
So when I said earlier about not having a plan, and not a lot of people feel like that, I feel like it's when you start something, not having a plan is not the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I think from your situation, you've gone through, you've done all of your learning over those 10, 11 years, to then sit down and go, okay, now I know how we do this.
Mm-hmm.
I know where I want to get to, and I know exactly how to work back from there. And that's a great plan built on experience and knowledge, which when you start, you don't necessarily have.
Exactly.
And so maybe that is where all the value is, in what you got before. Maybe not just necessarily getting money on exit, but is actually in learning how, really understanding that deep knowledge of how to grow it, and who you want to serve. And I think those are really key things. So is there anything in particular that you did do differently?
The one thing that I see as a common mistake in our industry, but I suppose it's true of a lot of industries, is once you work out the numbers, you work out what you need to do. And we ended up going, well, if we're going to win that many customers, that's how much we need to charge them. So we had an understanding of what we needed to charge. I find that a lot of businesses that start up just look at what everyone else is doing, and try and pick a price based on what they see the industry doing. Who's to say the industry is correct? Who's to say that they've all got it right? And you don't know what they're doing in terms of performance. So I find that a lot of people just follow other people, or they guess. And pricing, for me, understanding what makes up your pricing and your margins and things, is stuff that people need to do as quickly as possible. And if you're an established business, review it. Make sure it's right. Is it right for what you're trying to achieve? And the other common thing I see in startup businesses is that, going back to that, most businesses start from a point of view of, I've got a skill, I can do this skill for other people and start my own business. But the first thing they think is, I need to replace my salary that I was getting paid at my previous job with earnings from my business. But that's not the total you need to run a business. It might be enough to pay you, but it's not enough to pay everything else that's required, and the team that's required to actually grow a business. I feel a lot of people get stuck at that point, because they then go, I can't hire anyone because I can't afford it. But I'm really busy and I'm at capacity, and they get stuck at that point. So again, something we did differently this time versus the last. When we started, we did exactly the same at Pyrenet. We tried to do everything ourselves, whereas with Reformed, day one, we were like, right, this is the team that we're going to build, and this is what that team's going to do. So that's how we started, not thinking of it as jobs for ourselves, but thinking, how do we build a team that's going to serve the client?
So what's next for Joe?
So I started another business, because I'm used to it now. So Reform's been growing for a few years, and again, like I was saying before, as a business owner, I think it's important to be able to allow the business to grow and build a team, and to be able to step away from that business and it still continue to operate in the same way it would do if you were there. So we're at that phase now where we're kind of testing that out a little bit. Plus, my other two business partners have both had babies in the last few months. So that's helped, because it's drawn them out of the business. So it's a real test for the business. Can it operate without the founders involved? And it's doing well so far. We've brought in a good senior leadership team. And so that's going well. I am one of those people that because I get bored and I'm a bit of a workaholic and I like to do things. If I'm sat there with nothing to do, I'll do something, but it'll be in the business. So I'll be like, oh, I can help with that. I can do that. But in reality, that's not good, because I need to allow other people to be able to do that kind of work and not step on anyone's toes. So I kind of needed a bit of a distraction. So I've launched another business, which is designed around helping other IT services businesses in our sector to do the same.
To compete with you.
Yeah, basically. And this is the other thing. I'm at a point now where I understand that competition is not really competition, because there's so much work out there. Like, there's no need to get really defensive about situations and things like that. So I'm now helping other IT businesses to help them to grow and scale and get things right from an efficiency point of view and a systems point of view. Because I think, going back to that purpose piece, a lot of the things I've done in my career has all been about helping others. I like to see others succeed, and we've had, it's IT services, we're helping others. I think part of my purpose model is I like to see other people succeed, including people in our own team. I like to see them grow and their careers develop and their personal wealth. So
And you're doing a bit of public speaking as well?
I did a lot on cybersecurity. I am a bit of a cybersecurity expert. It's been downplayed over the years because, again, I've transitioned like my personal brand to some degree. But over the last decade or so, I've been doing lots of speaking in front of audiences about ethical hacking. I show people how hackers hack into their systems. It's fascinating stuff. So it generates intrigue.
Yeah.
And it's also generated lots of opportunities for us over the years because you become known as the go-to expert on cybersecurity. So whenever something happens, you get lots of recommendations.
Yeah.
That's why I started speaking in the first place. But that's then developed over to, I've started to really enjoy that. I like to, teach, educate. I've got to a point as well where, not just cybersecurity, I'm now speaking on stages about growing businesses and growing particularly IT services businesses. So I get invited to a lot of events in that world and share my story, share my mistakes, help other people, so yeah, I've been doing quite a bit of that as well. I'm off to Italy in a couple of weeks to speak at a MSP show in Italian.
Are you speaking in Italian?
I shouldn't have said in Italian because I can't do that. I can only speak English, but there's going to be translators and stuff there. So yeah, I'll be speaking in front of an Italian audience in a few weeks.
Well, that's great. Like for them to view you as an expert to come and deliver that in a foreign language is brilliant. Yeah. So hats off to you, mate. Yeah. Well done. So I know we've spoken a lot about, businesses and growth and systems and stuff like that. If people are listening to this, watching this, and they are in a situation where they might be struggling with growth or struggling with their own, being stuck in the business, what would be like 2 or 3 key things you think that people should focus on to try and get a grip?
Get to understand a very clear, defined target audience. Marketing and sales is so much easier if you know who you're selling to. Yeah. And one of the biggest mistakes I see people try to do is they try and service everything to everybody. It just doesn't work. It makes it so much more difficult to actually hone in on who you're focused on. When you understand that target audience, it's very easy to find out where they are.
Where they hang out.
Exactly. You're in the events game, right? So events happen for lots of industry sectors all the time. So when you understand who your potential client is, it makes it way easier to find out where you need to be hanging out, what languages you need to speak for them to understand what you do and how you help them. Yeah. But it becomes so much easier to market to and sell. And the other thing is when you're selling into a specific industry or a vertical or niche, you tend to say things that resonate with them because you've done it over and over again. So it makes closing the deal so much easier. But the other thing is on that point on marketing is everything's, to quote Daniel Priestley, everything goes downstream from leads. So I see over and over again, businesses are struggling. They might have a great product, great service, but they don't have enough people that are coming through the door. You have to have somebody or somebody in the business that's good at generating leads and opportunities. If you're not got leads coming through, product might be great, but who's going to buy it?
One of the things I ask all my guests is for a book recommendation.
Yeah.
So
well, there's a hint in the last sentence. Big fan of Daniel Priestley, and he's got a few books. I'm not going to name them all. If you want one book recommendation, out of his books, I really recommend Oversubscribed on the basis that understanding your pricing model, it goes back to some of the things that we've done earlier, but understanding your pricing model and getting yourself where you've got so much opportunity that the demand outstrips your supply. Yeah. And that allows you to drive pricing up. And the other thing I kind of, from Oversubscribed, that I kind of talk to a lot of people about is that people only focus on that demand piece as well. So how do I generate more leads? How do I get more opportunities? But actually there's 2 sides to that, the balance. It's the demand, but there's also the supply. You can actually increase your pricing by limiting supply. We see the same with the houses and things like that. If there's a limited supply, everything goes up in value. If you don't try and do everything for everybody and you limit how much capacity you have, then it drives the price up. But you still need to create, obviously, enough demand to service it. So.
Yeah. So Oversubscribe. I'm a big fan too. I really like Daniel's books. So yeah, thanks for that.
No problem.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for coming in, Joe, and sharing your story. Is really fascinating. I'm sure people will really enjoy listening to it. So,
yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you. Cheers.